Hi everyone, welcome to JDM Masters channel, and we are gonna do a drive video today. We are gonna obey the speed limits, of course. You will see everything here and you can see the signs on the road. In Japan you can go plus 10 and nobody will say anything, and everybody does this. And you will also see that lots of cars and trucks will be passing by us. Speed limits in Japan are pretty low, especially on like big highways like this, and this is Wangan. We will go on Wangan. It's around 50 miles per hour, which is 80 kilometers in kilometer, yeah. But plus 10 is okay. Nobody will say anything. Police won't say anything. And let's see if we obey the speed limits in the GT R34, which is around 600 horsepower, and it will be one of the hardest drive I will do. How hard it is to drive this machine in the speed limits. Of course, we have to respect the traffic. Okay, if you're ready, let's start from the beginning.
Welcome aboard Japonic's R34 GTR, and we'll be taking you on a little ride around the Astute or Metropolitan Expressway, a huge network of toll roads and overpasses and underpasses encompassing the Tokyo Metropolitan, Kanagawa Prefecture, Chiba Prefecture and Saitama Prefecture. And on this route we'll be explaining a little bit about the history, the network itself, and if you do come to Japan and happen to rent a car, going for a drive and see how you can enjoy the same scenic scenes that we usually drive on. This route here is called the K5, which is situated in Yokohama and is heading towards the very famous Daikoku Futo parking area. Now some of you may have heard of this. It is the melting pot of the car enthusiast, car culture world, which centers around a huge car park located on a big landmass right on the middle of the Wangan Expressway. Now a little bit about the Wangan itself. It is the longest straight in Japan for an expressway, consisting of a long straight passing from Yokohama, Kawasaki, past the Honda airport, along the coastal road. Now Wangan itself means coastal road or bayshore route, and this is also the setting for the anime Wangan Midnight, which itself is based on 1980s and 1990s street racing culture. Some of you may know the very famous Midnight Racing team made their fame around the world, driving on their high-powered cars over 300 kilometers an hour. Of course, these days that sort of thing doesn't happen. Police activity has been very, very strict around, and they've cracked down on a lot of street racing, so we do try to take it safe. And safety is, of course, the most important thing that we always emphasize going for these drives. There's nothing to show, or there's not really any benefit of really speeding, because Japan offers some of the smoothest highways and some of the smoothest roads. As you can see, traveling on this road here, there are hardly any road undulations and bumps. And on this particular section on the right here, we'll be passing through the very famous Minatomiro. Maybe you can't really see it, but right now it is passing through underpass, which is on the way onto the Wangan. And so we'll be going left right now into the giant loop. And Japan is also filled with a myriad of constructions of the world's best civil engineering. And Japan is 70% mountains, and the biggest flats on the Kanto Plain, which covers Tokyo, Kanagawa and Chiba section, a large part of Saitama, is a huge plain. Now, this is where all the buildings and factories all concentrated. And on the Yokohama side, which is a little bit south of Tokyo, it's along the coastal bay, and the word Wangan comes from this word, to the bay shore running along the bay, and it's long straight. But also, as we're coming into this loop here on the left, you can see these huge multi-story loop bridges which circles around, creating a sort of interchange which actually spirals out in 3 different directions. So coming into now on this ramp, we'll be taking this little round going into the car park. Now for those of you who play a very popular game Assetto Corsa, may actually find in this mod that it includes this section, although probably you can't go into the car park, but we'll be taking you on a little drive-through tour just to see it in the daytime. next time we'll be coming back in the night, and you can also check our previous video where we talked about the Daikoku Futo and its night culture. So most of these roads are toll roads, and in Japan you have to pay either through cash or a special system called the ETC. Now all the roads here are owned by the government and also shared by the different prefectural offices. The money that goes from these tolls goes painstakingly into paving and maintaining the very smooth roads and ensuring that traffic support owned by a company called Nexco, which ensures road safety and also working in conjunction with the police. And they're very active and come to the rescue or call. And so now we're entering the car park, and you can see how massive it is. Over 250 over cars can park on one side and also trucks on the other side. So as we're passing through this area at nighttime, it's just filled, especially on the weekends of Friday and Saturday, with all kinds of car enthusiasts and cars, all kinds of level of trim, whether it's stands, whether it's tuned cars, and dressed in show-up cars. And this is where people come together and meet their friends, talk. But also in the daytime, sometimes on the weekend, we will find supercar owners on a Sunday. They'll let us know in the comments if you'd like us to preview that, perhaps. Now, passing through the police station on the left side, and also a convenience store called Lawson's. Right on the right side, there is a big parking for trucks, and this is meant for truck drivers to have a break on the long journey while transporting many merchandise from Saitama or Chiba all the way into Kanagawa and to the other side. So this is the exit. Going up now, I'll be rejoining the huge loop, and as we're going up you can actually take three different directions. One is going back on the K5, which leads to a loop called the Yokohama line, which actually can turn around. So there's some interesting things about this Metropolitan Expressway. Because it is an interchange, you can actually get on the network paying one fee, but if you have the ETC, each gate has its own small tolls, and this can actually take you on a round-trip tour, which we'll be explaining a little later before getting off. Now obviously many road users just use this to get from point A to point B, but in the street culture, especially drivers or rather street racers of the more ambitious kind, they would actually get on this and stop at certain car parks along the network and go for so-called high-spirited runs, almost indulging in street racing. Of course, that sort of thing does still happen, very particularly more in the 80s and the 90s, where it was at its peak. And so this is the second level, and you can see the level on top is also a loop, which is actually interlaying, and it goes up and down counterclockwise and clockwise. So we'll be taking the right over here and heading down the Wangan towards the Haneda Airport. This is the start of one of the longest straits in Japan, as we mentioned earlier. Now this passes through a large part of the Kawasaki and Yokohama Industrial Park. Now in the day, obviously, on a bright day like this, you can actually see the Minato Mirai on the left-hand side as you're coming over two huge suspension bridges. So Daikoku Futo is actually situated between these two bridges. The one that comes from Minato Mirai is called the Bay Bridge, which is a double arch suspension bridge, and the one that you can see right in the foreground is the Tsurumi Tsubasa Bridge, which, if you are astute and watch the Wangan Midnight animation or the movie, you can actually see this in the scene, or if you actually play the game. Now in Assetto Corsa, this is actually reflected in very high detail, road for road and sign for sign, and even all these posts and the shape of everything. Of course, the only difference is the normal traffic. And so driving along in the GTR at this speed is probably quite a challenge, but flowing with the traffic is something that is important in any traffic situation. Now, unlike other countries, maybe in Europe or America, the speed limit is actually pretty low, as we mentioned before. A lot of the post signs is 80 or 90. You can see that a lot of the cars do go within the speed limit. Now, having only 2 or 3 lanes in this particular area, the Wangan has actually 3 lanes, It's a lot narrower than a lot of roads in other countries, maybe in Europe or America or even in China. So having 3 lanes means it's not easy to weave in and out and change lanes. Therefore, might be the setting of the speed limits. And you can see also trucks delivering goods. They're very, very active on the road, going up and down at any time of the day. This is very, very usual, and the traffic usually follows around these trucks. Now, on the right lane we go. And something interesting about the Japanese traffic law: if you do get stopped by the police for speeding in the right lane, they would actually tell you that you're probably driving too long or too fast in the right lane. What you're supposed to do is use the right lane as an overtaking line, and you can increase your speed even maybe a little bit more than the speed limit just to overtake and go back either into the middle lane or the left lane. And this is something we've experienced ourselves, but the fact of the matter is a lot of people do actually drive on the right lane and keep on going. There's several certain customs that Japanese road users use, and that is actually the lack of using the horn called klaxon in Japan. Hardly you will ever see people using the horns to get people out of the way, much less so in other countries. The use of the passing lights to also get other people to move out of the right lane is not as often used. Instead, some cars may actually come up to you quite close, almost at a tailgating speed, and you're supposed to move out of the way. Now, generally, Japanese road users are very, very safe, especially in the Kanto region, which encompasses Kanagawa, Tokyo, Chiba, and Saitama, and also Gunma. Now, people here have very good manners, driving at a courtesy rate that is perhaps unseen in other parts of the world. This goes somehow into the culture as well, where people do respect each other's distances and also generically for the convenience of others. And this can be seen very much on the road, and you can see people actually keeping the distances, which makes it very safe to drive on any kind of roads, especially on the highways. And the pace is brisk. Going on this long straight can be quite interesting, because it is perhaps the only long straight that you can actually drive with 3 lanes, and it gets a lot more interesting at night, of course, with the lights. Now, contrary to popular belief, doing these very high speed runs on the Wangan is probably not possible anymore. Perhaps you might be able to see from the undulations and the bumps on this stiff suspension GTR that if you were to go at anything beyond 120 to 130, the road does get a little bumpy, and going at certain higher speeds would actually cause the car to unsettle. The fact of the matter is the roads have gotten a lot worse for wear compared to 20 years ago, where it's probably more smoother. And this is of course due to heavy road use, and traffic has increased a lot in the past 20 years. Now, driving in Japan is sometimes a bit challenging for those who've come here for the first time. Although, as we mentioned earlier, road users are quite polite and considerate, and they do actually use their signals, or we call winkers in Japan, to signal before they change lanes, and they give each other a lot of space, generally speaking. But the challenge is perhaps in understanding or deciphering the street signs or the road signs. Of course, it's written in traditional Japanese kanji, the characters, but also written in English. And in the past 4 years or so, they've actually coded each highway with marks, and also each exit with a certain alphanumeric code. But the network itself hasn't really changed, and a lot of the filter lanes or the on-ramps have very short distance to get in and off, and often merging from the entrance onto the highway itself can be quite challenging, as you don't have a lot of space to merge. And so this may be a little bit unsettling for people who come from countries like Australia or America or even the UK, that might think that there's not enough space, but Japanese drivers are actually very used to it. And one tip when you're driving on the first time in Japan, as you're coming onto these highways, is to actually increase your speed as you're coming out, to give a signal that and make yourself obvious to people who are coming in on the roadway and give your signal very quickly. And as soon as you see space, people actually might let you go or slow down just before entering. Now be careful. Oh, so we just passed an unmarked police car which stopped the truck on the left hand side. And so there's also a danger of these in Japan. A lot of times the marked patrol cars, as we call them in Japan, the police cars, don't actually run on the highways, but they use undercover cop cars which can follow you if you're going on the right lane very, very fast. Usually it's a Toyota Crown or a Mark X, black or silver or white. So if you do see this, be careful, and there'll be two blinking signal lights in the grille, and they'll tell you in Japanese over the loudspeaker to move to one side. Now if you do get pulled over by the police, the best thing to do is just to stay calm, and they're usually very, very friendly and courteous. They may not be able to speak English, but you will probably definitely get done in for a ticket. Now, the little secret here is that if you're on an international driver's license, you'll probably have to pay a fine if you're going over the speed limit of over 40 kilometers more than the speed limit. Anyway, that aside, so we're now inside a series of long tunnels that is part of the Wangan network. Now, the first one here turns off at the end onto the Haneda Airport. Now, the Haneda Airport is the Tokyo local district airport, and it has domestic flights and also international flights in which you can fly directly into Tokyo, versus the traditional Narita Airport, which is actually about 50 kilometers away from the city center. A lot of flights do fly in these days, but well, now flights are actually being cut down less. The Haneda Airport is the central airport at which you want to come in by flight, maybe an indirect flight. So passing through to the next tunnel, I will be going underneath the Tokyo Bay area, which actually runs under the Kawasaki line, and the tunnels are spaces where there is actually more opportunity to overtake quickly. As you can see, the dotted lines here make it easier to overtake, but also trucks do take the opportunity to speed up, and a lot of cars actually do. But driving here at night especially is quite an experience. Now these tunnels are very, very long, and Japan has a lot of tunnels due to the wide number of mountains. If you do drive onto the other expressways like the Tomei or the Higashi Kanto, you'll find that it passes through a lot of mountains, and many of these tunnels are very, very long, and they pass through many, many sections, and Japanese have actually one of the best civil engineering for tunnels. But this particular tunnel right here goes underneath the Tokyo Bay, and it goes into the other section which connects onto the Tokyo Metropolitan area. Now, it is really, really long, but also the road here is especially bumpy, and with a lot of undulations coming in from the other side. Now, do watch out in nighttime. Still get some people actually trying to do high-speed runs, so it's best to just stay in the middle lane, and it's giving it a little bit, of course, just to get that sound, the echo coming out into the sunlight now. And what's the upcoming sign? And it's going into here, right here. This is the Haneda Airport area, and very soon you will see the overpass. And so on the left and on the right are buildings which you can see the car park, and coming up very soon, big massive car parks for the domestic flight. And after this little tunnel here, there is a speed camera, which if you're going at anything over 120, you'll probably most likely get caught. So gingerly along here, not too much speed. Okay, Japonic's really obeying the speed rule here right now, and here is the speed camera. But of course, take the time to see the control tower, which is coming up after this loop right here. And this red arch here is the overpass bridge linking the Terminals A and Terminals B. Now the international side is somewhere on the left, which is actually very close to the south part of Tokyo. So we're going to be going in straight into the Metropolitan and passing through the Odaiba area. Now if you look at the map of the Tokyo Metropolitan Expressway, this Wangan line actually runs all the way to Chiba along the stretch and passing by the Disneyland. So this stretch alone is in total about 60 kilometers, which adds to the Metropolitan Expressway's length. Now one can actually travel on this road and make a loop on the C1, which is a loop system made way back in the original 1960s Tokyo Olympics. So let's go into a little story about the history of this Metropolitan Expressway. Before the first Olympics in Tokyo, the government wanted to modernize Japan, and they decided that they needed to improve the infrastructure, and one of those was the highways. At that time, there was not any system that could support cars with higher speeds. Now, of course, in the 1960s, cars generally had lower power and were very small, and the acceleration was not as fast as today's cars. And so most of the C1 network, which you can see in reference photos here, are actually very narrow. In fact, it's so narrow that it resembles a kind of like race circuit, which lends its popularity to street racing. But of course, it still kind of takes place these days. Oh, and so this is actually the tunnel that goes underneath an important part of the base. It's connected in several areas, but it's also orange and light, which gives it the best effect when it's at night for photo shoots. Anyway, back to the story of the Tokyo Metropolitan C1 Expressway. Now in the 1960s, as we mentioned earlier on, cars weren't really that fast. And the fastest car would probably be European cars, but the number of traffic that was on the road in those days weren't that much. Now, Tokyo being a very densely built up city with a lot of buildings, didn't allow a lot of space for such a highway to be built. So the engineering department said, why not just build a lot of the sections above ground? So if you're driving on the old C1, a lot of it is actually above ground in a multi-tier sort of way. It travels through and between buildings, and some parts of it actually do go underground, like the Ginza part. And so this was the infrastructure that was added on to the normal roads to reduce traffic. Now, fast forward 30 years later, and the structure is still the same, thereby building up a lot of traffic. And so the original network was then supplemented and added on with several other loops. So there's actually the C2 loop here, as you can see in the sign that just came up. There's actually two concentric loops, one that builds upon each other and linking other expressways. It's a huge network which draws its similarity in type maybe to the British network system. Goes in a loop in four different circles, but the C1 is the oldest and also the smallest one, and that actually connects into the line that we're on now, Wangan Expressway, which was added in the late 80s. And so this is meant to be establishing link of transportation between Tokyo and Kanagawa Prefecture. And these days the traffic's even more, and so it just becomes more and more crowded, especially during the morning rush hour. It can take anywhere between an hour and a half, or even up to 2 hours coming from the central part of the south of Yokohama just to make it into Tokyo. It's not a wise time to travel into Tokyo, or also the rush hour coming out. Now, a lot of residents who work in the city center with a population of about 13 million people actually live in the suburbs around the Metropolitan, namely around Kanagawa on the south, Chiba on the east, and up in the north, Saitama. Of course, most people in Japan take the very efficient and well-organized multi-train lines run by JR and KQ, and a lot of other private lines. But people who do have to go to work by car are mainly people who work in big factories and need to use car as their trade. So this is the reason why, even though most people go to work on the trains, and you'll find it jam-packed right up to the doors every rush hour in the morning, but there are still a large number of people who use cars to go to work. And since most of the lanes are only 2 lanes in most of the network, and you can see here this is a new line on the left. It goes connecting to the C2. So this part here, as you can see, all these complicated myriad of bridges are actually new links which connected the older parts of the Metropolitan Expressway onto this Wangan line. Now we're going to be driving through one part. Oh, and there's something interesting for those of you who play the Wangan Midnight Arcade game. Right around this section here in the game still exists a toll gate, which was actually removed 2 or 3 years ago. So this part is all smooth now. The tolls have all been amalgamated into 1,300 if you pay by cash. So this is the final underground bridge that goes into Odaiba, which is a massive reclaimed land section just off the south part of Tokyo. It also houses some very famous buildings like the Fuji Television headquarters, and also a mini Statue of Liberty on the man-made beach. It's also the place for an exhibition hall called the Big Sight, where the Tokyo Auto Salon, no, correction, the motor show is actually being held biannually. The auto salon is actually held in Chiba, called a place called Makuhari, and this road goes all the way straight to there. So this tunnel is one of the shortest, but also goes quite deep, and now it's going on an uphill climb. And as we're coming out of this tunnel, you will be able to see Odaiba. Now look carefully the next time you play Assetto Corsa or the Wangan Midnight game, and into the bright sunlight, and all these buildings on the left here, and an interesting structure on the left coming up after this bridge. Yes, this is the Fuji Television headquarters, a little globe inside, which gives it a very interesting architectural feel. This is between the 2 areas of the Odaiba, and at night you will be able to see a huge Ferris wheel on the right. And Japan is actually full of these Ferris wheels, and it lights up the sky with a myriad of colors. And in fact, the whole Tokyo night scene is really nice. In daytime, it perhaps looks like any other country except for the green and blue signs which are written in Japanese. Most of all, it's pretty peaceful, just driving smoothly on this road as you're trying to get to somewhere. Now, this part also leads into the C2, but before that, there is a famous parking area called Tatsumi, which some of you may have heard of. It's also a small gathering of car enthusiasts, and in the nighttime and also in the weekends. A lot of these places have been closed by the police very often now, but in daytime is where people do gather on this Route 10, just further up here, and we'll be turning in. And a lot of sort of little outer suburb areas where you can find just cheaper but more high-end residential areas out of Tokyo. Now, what's interesting about the Wangan is that it's actually the most efficient way to cross a huge distance for a minimal sum of 1,300. Now, there's also something called the ETC, called the Electronic Toll Collection. Now, this is a credit card based system where you insert into a special reader which has to be installed aftermarket, and most Japanese use this so that they can get certain discounts when they use it at night, or between short distances between 2 different exits on the Metropolitan network. But if you're coming here to Japan and renting a car, it's now possible to actually borrow or rent one of these ETC cars, and it's actually more efficient and more economical way to get from place to place. So driving in Japan really isn't that scary, even if you don't know how to read the signs. Now, a little thing about using Google Maps, many areas of the Metropolitan Expressway, especially in Tokyo, are above ground, as we said, and they're actually running above conventional roads, which makes it a little bit tricky for even the navigation system. So now Japonic is actually turned up into the Tatsumi ramp. You can see the sign here, parking area, and he's going to go into the pretty small car park. And yes, on the left hand side is a wall that wasn't there until very recently. Now, because of the large number of activities of car enthusiasts and people just gathering and taking up space, and it's causing a nuisance, most of them do come here to take photos of the night scene. And so the police have taken measures by putting this rather short wall, not that really cuts out a lot of scenery, but it does make it less scenic than before. Interestingly though, the excuse they use that it is actually meant to cut out noise, but and you also find that particular feature as you drive around on these Metropolitan Expressways. There are huge shields on both sides which are meant to shield off sounds.
So guys, what do you think about the speed limits in Japan and in those roads, like 3 lanes? I was going plus 10 of the speed limit, and you have seen everybody else was passing by me. Some of them was like 100, maybe 110. Even we have seen 120 and 130. And we also seen a policeman who took a truck to the left side for a ticket. I really don't like the speed limits in Japan. At least they should be plus 20, plus 30 more, whatever they have now. For example, Wangan has 80. It should be at least 110, which is around 70 miles per hour, right? Oh, nice Mustang. Really tired of those speed limits in Japan, and this was the hardest drive I have ever done in R34 GTR on Wangan. It's hard. It's hard. It's the longest straight in Tokyo, and 3 lanes. You can go. Oh, nice Mustang again. What the? Okay, guys, that's it from me. Hope you liked the video. If you want any other drive videos like this, let me know. Okay, see you in the next video, guys. Peace out.